Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge, where we look at one of the most popular stocks in the world and why it has so much unusual activity. On today's Rebel's Edge. Bang! Well, Pete, back here for the final show of the week, September 12th, 2024. I'm Jon Najarian. He is Pete Najarian. I'm out here in New York. I'll be on with Charles Payne, Pete, somewhere in the 2 p.m. hour. I don't know where yet, but in the 2 p.m. hour, I'll be on with Charles, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And then I'll be giving awards at the Hedge Fund Awards dinner over for Institutional Investor Magazine. So that'll be fun tonight.
That'll be great.
Hosting that one, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, as a matter of fact, this morning I was on with Mornings with Maria, except for Maria wasn't there. But I think if anybody deserves vacation, that woman works her tail off year round. So any break she can get, I think, is well worth it. But we had a great discussion. We talked about a lot of things, probably what you and I are going to talk about here in this macro minute. So we may as well jump on.
Let's do it. Let's kick it off, Pete, with producer prices because they rose more than anticipated in August, even though they only rose 0.2%. That's despite the fact, Pete, that the stuff that really matters for the most part, like fuel, energy, let's call it, went down pretty dramatically. You and I talked about yesterday, Brent hit the lowest level in an awfully long time. That's the European version of crude oil. And despite the fact that that very big input was down, producer prices were up primarily by higher service costs. So that really kept us on the quarter point. If they were down or whatever, Pete, then maybe the Fed would be more comfortable with 50 basis points, but we're locked in at 25 basis point cut next Wednesday.
Fully agreed with you. I think that's exactly what we came up with today, talking about it on that show, because we looked at the CPI yesterday and obviously we saw the immediate reaction on the markets, and then you get the PPI today. But that move yesterday, John, was pretty outrageous, from being down 700 on the Dow to basically rallying not only all the way back, but getting into very strong positive territory. That was quite a turn and burn. And it's amazing. But PPI, that number today, I think you're exactly right. And by the way, if the next couple of cuts that we've got in front of us, I think if they deviate and suddenly go to 50, John, it will shake the markets. So I think the fact that they're going to probably stick to the guns, and he's been very clear at a quarter, I think that's exactly what we'll see in the next week or so.
Yep. Next Wednesday at 2 p.m., folks. That's when you'll hear. All right, Pete, let's do fantastic futures. I'll kick it off by saying silver, palladium, natural gas, all up. So again, if they're paying attention, and I think they are, the fact that, yeah, we did bottom this week, maybe in terms of where crude oil was and so forth, as far as that energy source, but nat gas is turning to the upside and moving up. And this is the time of year when it does start to move up, Pete. So I'm going to say, keep an eye on that.
And an interesting rebound we're seeing out of crude. You mentioned it already, but it got all the way down to 65, and now here it is pushing back up a little bit closer to 70. On top of that, John, you've got gold, another high. It just continues to get those next level highs, and it has not pulled back a whole heck of a lot. It's 3 steps forward, 1 step back is kind of the way gold has been trading. I'd also like to point out, as far as the VIX yesterday, John, we were in a range of 17.5 to 21.5. You can guess where we were at the end of the day, close to 17.5. 21.5, though, when we're down 700 points on the Dow, we're down over 100 points on the S&P, and then of course the Nasdaq starts to participate, but not nearly as much as the Dow to that downward move. And we only hit 2150. I think that was a great sort of an area for us to say, well, wait a minute, why isn't the VIX going a heck of a lot higher? It turned, it burned, and flipped 800 points from that point in the first 60 or 90 minutes of the day. Absolutely amazing. And today, we're sitting again right there in the middle 17. So I think that volatility index has been very, very telling.
certainly has. And it will be interesting, of course, to watch into the announcement, even though we're at, like I said, with the CME tool, we're at 85% chance of 25 basis point cut.
Yep.
All right, Pete, JP Morgan, I thought this was one of the most interesting headlines because they talked about how their net interest income was going to be down from $91 billion. We talked about that, you and I. But today, that's not the story. Today, it's the amount of hours that their junior bankers work. And folks, wait till you hear this. The amount of hours they work is stunning. So for instance, they are now capping the daily work at 13 hours a day. 13 hours a day for all you 9-to-5ers or less out there if you're working remote. Basically, they're going to cap them at 80 hours a week, Pete. Now, that means a 6-day work week from 8:30 in the morning till 10 p.m. with short breaks for meals. Really? That's how much they're, I mean, I know they pay them a lot, Pete. Junior bankers make, 6 figures, but oh my, they don't have any time to spend it.
No. And John, I did read $200,000 is the entry level for JP Morgan. So they are getting compensated. But if you break it down to what they're actually talking about, and by the way, they also talked about an 11-hour day, 7 days a week. That's not, okay. That sounds freaking fantastic. Now, I just kind of wonder on those weekends how much is really getting done. I mean, I'm not sure I fully can comprehend exactly how that works. All that being said, they did get a bit of a hit the other day on that net interest income, but it's gotten basically the 52-week high is 225. It pulled back about 5% or so, got all the way down 216-ish or 206 or something like that. But I'll tell you, it's still hanging in there, and it's not that far off of those 52-week highs, all-time highs. So it says a lot to me about what's going on, and I always bring up investment banking, but that was something that was brought up as well by somebody else today as I was reading about this. They're looking at that to be up 15% year over year. That's going to be a monster number, and that's going to make up for a lot, not everything probably, but a lot when it comes to not just Goldman, not just JP Morgan, but you could add in there Citi and others that are involved in the investment banking world in a big way. This is something that I think people aren't factoring that in as much as they should.
Well, let me just throw one more thing about that employment, Pete. They are guaranteed, the U.S. staff, I read through this document, the U.S. staff is guaranteed one full weekend every 3 months. Think of that. One full weekend. So you get both Saturday and Sunday off, but only once a quarter.
4 times a year. Wonderful. Wow. That's just great.
Yep. Again, hard to spend that money that they're making. And that's a pretty severe trade-off for your life, though. All right. Let's talk about Nvidia, Pete, because not only is it one of the premier stocks in the world, it's one that I talked about on our webinar earlier this week. I talked about how we have had unusual activity in it, and that was a trigger for me to build a bigger position than I had already. There's a look at, for instance, they bought 19,000. That's 1.9 million share equivalent, folks, of the October 109 calls. They did that just last week, just 6 days ago. Well, that trade only made them about 18 or 19 million dollars. And then they did another trade. And then another, and then another. I mean, Pete, today alone, we've had what 3 different, there they are. Thank you very much, Jared. 3 different hits of unusual activity. 12,000 of those 125 calls in October, not regular October, but the 11th. 18,000 of the October 124 calls, 5,000 of the November 150. I mean, they are just buying in Nvidia, Pete.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And the bullishness that's coming out and this big spike to the upside. And I mentioned that the SMH has made a big flip. It was up 5%, but it's crazy. And why is that up so much? Well, I think Nvidia is a pretty decent, all you have to do is maybe take a peek over that and see where that was and where it is now. Basically, look at that. Look at the representation of where that was. And basically following along with that UOA, unusual option activity, that's been absolutely incredible. One of the things that Jensen Wong also said, John, he says for every dollar spent in the cloud services provider, $5 will come out of that in rentals. That's a pretty decent number, I would say. I would say that things are going pretty well for Nvidia. When everybody wants to throw a little cold water on them, which a lot of folks have recently, I don't think that they should be doing that. They're also hiring more digital engineers so that they can reach a 100x, not a 10x, a 100x. So there's a lot going on, and I think when you see all of the unusual options that we're just talking about, and John, they're not the very short term like so much of what we're seeing. These are going out in time. They're basically saying, look, this is a stock that we actually believe in, not just immediately, just a one day move. They're looking for this thing to really extend to the upside.
Yeah, and I think they're right, Pete. Knock on wood. It's now my third largest position behind Apple and Microsoft. So it leapfrogged because of that unusual activity that we had. Mm-hmm. And you guys should absolutely check out when we have those free webinars and things, because the trade that we talked about in that webinar, like I say, worked out pretty well for anybody that put it on. And there is also a mastermind event that Pete and I will be at, along with Charlie Gasparino, Liz Clayman, let's see, Larry McDonald. So many great traders and educators are going to be there October 11th down in Aventura, Florida. Only 100 seats are available. There's a lot less than 100 available right now. If you scan that code, or if you dial 888-809-8058, that's 888-809-8058, you can join us. But do it soon, folks, because when these seats are gone, they're gone. We moved it over from the big venue where will be the previous 2 days to a more intimate venue for us to be able to trade live and for you to be able to trade live right alongside of us. Mm-hmm. All right, Pete, let's talk about Signet Jewelers, SIG. Second quarter sales were down 7.6%. That's pretty big, right?
Yeah.
So you might think that maybe they wouldn't be doing so well, but you would be wrong, because with the adjusted earnings per share of $1.25, that was 11 cents better than street, and all of their other numbers are good, just not that sales number, which, like I say, was a decline year over year. But that's why SIG isn't getting hit on that miss on sales, Pete.
Well, and as it started to move to the upside, John, one of the things that was propelling it as well is probably a very large short position with about 11% plus in Signet as far as the short position. They also had a nice, strong guide. They also had gross margins that were up. So to your point, they had the one thing, and that was the decline, the sales decline. But outside of that, this is a stock that absolutely, and by the way, the PE is a 7, but this is a stock that absolutely, in most every other category, they blew it out. So 65 to 112 is the range. It was trading 92 last I looked, up 17% or so. Not so bad. And the guidance was strong. So you combine all of that, Signet's doing a lot of things right. Now we'll see if they can continue on and follow within that guidance that they provided.
Well, I would bet along with them rather than against them on this one.
Yeah.
All right. Let's take a look, Pete, at what's going on in CAL. We don't talk about it much. Yeah. It's Caleres, which means like glowing or something like that in Latin. But they're the parent company of Famous Footwear. Mm-hmm. So do they sell their own brands? They do, but it's not that's not a big part of their business. They sell everybody else's brands. So think of them as, this shoe store that people go into for what? For famous brands. And this one, revenue, Pete, was 683 million versus an estimate of 723. So they missed it by a lot on the revenue side. Earnings, 85 cents. They were expecting $1.22. I know you've got other metrics, Pete, but if you miss on sales and you miss on bottom line number, in other words, profit, you're not going to have a good quarter. And they certainly didn't. and the stock fell out of bed today.
For all the right reasons. Last I looked, this was down about 18-19%, John, and it's very close to the 52-week lows. 24 to 44 is the range. Last I looked, it was around 29, so inching that much closer all the way. But to your point, yeah, those earnings numbers were awful. And then all you got to do is say, well, this is the one that I always like to look at the most closely, is the earnings versus year over year. Well, a year ago, they were at about 98. Now they're 85. That's not good. That's pretty awful. And there are a heck of a lot of shorts in here. We can see how sometimes the shorts can squeeze things to the upside. Well, this time the shorts are getting absolutely hammered to the downside. That might start to trigger if they hit a little bit closer to that 52-week low, John. There might be some shorts that say, you know what, we're going to take a little bit off. And that might be the time to start considering something. But also, when you look at these numbers, they're pretty pathetic across everywhere. And the guidance, that wasn't so good either.
Yep, it was a pretty tough report. And like you say, you lose 19% of the value of your stock overnight. That's a tough day. They're going to have to re-examine how exactly they're going to move some of that merchandise into the carts of consumers.
Yeah.
All right, Pete. Let's talk a little bit about sports.
Yeah.
What do you got that we should know about today?
Well, I thought it would be fun today, John. We only 1 week into the season, of course. We got a game tonight, and obviously over the weekend we'll have the rest of those games, including a Monday night game. But one thing I wanted to point out before we get to the teams themselves, how about the ratings? That opening game, and that made all the sense in the world, and I thought this was brilliant that they did this, but the Kansas City Chiefs played the Baltimore Ravens, right? You've got two of the best teams probably in the AFC. At least everybody's expectation is that. They had a record for opening day, 28.9 million viewers for that, John. The Lions-Rams overtime game, 22.7 million viewers. And the Eagles-Packers out of Brazil, 14 million. Some really, really nice numbers coming for the NFL. But what I wanted to do was this. What game this weekend are you looking most forward to? What game do you think will be the most competitive? What's the most fun? Why is that? I'm going to go this way. You got New Orleans playing at Dallas. We really don't know enough about New Orleans. They played Carolina and beat the tar out of them. Tampa Bay got a heck of a quarterback in Baker Mayfield. I think the world of him, had 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. They're going up to play up in Detroit. That could be a pretty interesting game. The 49ers are coming to Minnesota. Suddenly, John, the people in Minnesota, after one game with Darnold, they think he's the second coming of Fran Tarkington. Now we're going to find out, is he that or is he something else? And he could be something else, and that's the place I'm leaning. But we'll find out. The Buffalo-Miami game is the game that I like the most. And the reason I like that is Buffalo gets the opportunity to go to Miami early. So Buffalo's already, they've been in warm weather. It's not that big flash, scary thing when you're in November. You haven't been in hot air for a long time up in Buffalo. But I also like the idea of just looking at those two quarterbacks as well. Tua, he's about 62% on his completion, John. That's not all that great. It's getting a heck of a lot of money. They won their first game. But Josh Allen, 18 of 23. He is 78%, had a couple of touchdowns. You know he's a big human being that can run the football pretty well as well. I think that game's going to be fun. I think Buffalo should take them, but it is on the road, so it's going to be a little bit difficult in a rowdy crowd and all of the things going on with Tyreek Hill and everything else that's going on there. What do you think? What's your favorite game of the weekend? Is it something to do with your Bears, or what do you think is the best game coming forward?
I like that game in Detroit with Tampa Bay, Pete.
Yeah.
I think that just because you and I have a real affinity for Campbell, the coach up there, and the sort of football that they play. So I really like that.
Yeah.
The Vikings, 49ers, I give the Vikes a better chance probably than you do, but that's me looking in from the outside. You've been on the sideline. You've seen the defense. And obviously, Gang Green, the Jets, did not play defense against the 49ers last week. So can the Vikings do better? They're not known for defense. Ever since the Purple People Eaters, Pete, they have sucked on defense. So we'll see. And obviously, they lost. They lost a number 1 pick that they had to cut because he just couldn't play anymore, really. And they lost, sadly, a great kid out of Georgia from that drunk driving accident. Was not him that was drunk driving. A drunk driver hit him and his friends in a car. So tragedy. A game that I like, Pete, I kind of like because it's coast to coast. I like Seattle against New England. And nobody can name, except people in New England, nobody can name me people who are playing for that team anymore. It used to be you knew every guy on offense, you knew every guy on defense, and they were, 6-time Super Bowl champs. Mm-hmm. Well, now you don't know who's on that team. And meanwhile, Seattle's coming in there with a chip on their shoulder and a really pretty good football team. Yeah. Now, they're not the number one team out there, and the Rams have already lost in the same division with San Francisco. So for these guys to, maintain, I think is something I think that's a good cover. So if, for people that bet the spreads, I think that's a good cover. We'll talk about it on Monday, whether or not, I think it's 3 or 3.5 right now, Pete.
That's a coast to coast, like you said. It's the easier flight, maybe not. Depends on how you do it and how you fly and everything else. But it's going to be an interesting one for sure, John. And a shout out to my guy, Kennedy Palomalo, who's the running back coach at Seattle. Those guys, wherever he goes, he's got a good running back. Wherever he goes, he makes guys better at running back. And the running back they've got is the total stud now because he's getting a lot of help from Kennedy. All right, John, college football. What's the best game? I've got one picked out for you that I know you're going to like a lot. So you might even pick the same game. I don't know. Boston College is number 24 because all they've done is win the first couple of games, and they did it in an amazing way. Missouri, also, they're all the way up Missouri now. They're all the way up to number 6. Now, Missouri is a heck of a football team. Last year, they went 11-2. People probably don't realize that Missouri, first of all, is in the SEC. Second of all, went to their bowl game and won with an 11-2 record last year. They won 89-0 in their first 2 games. Now, did they play anybody? No. They didn't. They played Murray State and Buffalo, but nonetheless, their defense held both those 2 Titans to 127 average yards against them. So I think they've got a real defense. I think they've also got a heck of an offense. But Boston College is a lot of fun, John. They got Trayshawn Ward, who's been an incredible player for them. He catches the ball out of the backfield. He's done a great job running. By the way, they ran for 263 yards against Florida State when they beat them, and they just recently beat Duquesne. So Duquesne, okay, it is what it is. But you go out and beat number 10 at the time, Florida State, and you beat them pretty good, 28-13, and you put up running numbers like that, averaged 5 a carry, ran it 52 times on them. I would say that that's a pretty good football team, the way they react and how they play the game. They pound the ball down your throat, and if they can do that, it'll be very interesting because Missouri's defense is damn good.
Yeah, they are. Yes, they are. Pete, I've got one for you that's a head scratcher, and it is Oregon versus Oregon State.
Yeah.
Oregon's a huge pick. They're probably 15, 16-point favorite in the game. And Oregon State's not a bad team, but as you said, their quarterback transferred. They've got some issues. And this is a rivalry game that's usually at the end of the season.
Yeah.
To see this one and Washington State at the beginning of the season, Pete, is a bit of a head scratcher for me. That Washington State, of course, was in the national championship last year. They're supposed to be about a 4 to 5 point favorite over Washington State. But I got one for you, Pete, that I think is interesting because Tulane is playing at Oklahoma. Now, a decade ago, Oklahoma would have been giving 30.
Yeah.
But Tulane has played well and gone to bowl games the last few years. Now, they're still getting a lot of points. Let me see. What is it right now? They're getting 13, Pete, in this game. Should not be able to stay on the field with Oklahoma. I think we both agree to that. But I'd say be careful because you don't want to be overconfident and looking past this one because when people they beat USC. They've beaten some really good teams. So I'd say keep an eye on this one. But, I think Oklahoma should cover unless they really screw up, Pete.
I agree with you. Oklahoma hasn't played well yet, though. In their first game or two, last week they didn't play very well at all. And I think that's something that either that gets fixed or Tulane, to your point, they're kind of a quiet giant, right? I mean, they've turned into a really good, powerful football team. They've gone to their bowl games. They've had some great records. I believe they lost the quarterback last year to the NFL. So that's always a difficult thing. But if they're in the game going into the third quarter or through the end of the third quarter, Oklahoma might be shaking a little bit, John. And that might be scary because Oklahoma came in this year as a very highly thought of team that's going to be, basically running for one of those 12 spots. And if they lose that game to Tulane, they can forget about any of those 12 spots.
Yeah. Well, one game just for laughs. And because our friend J.C. Peretz went to the U, Pete, I'm going to say Miami at Miami against Ball State. I don't know if you can set a line high enough, but right now the line is just shy of 40.
Yowza.
For that. And, I'm sure there are some good athletes at Ball State, but they should not be able to be on the field very long with these guys, especially, going down to Miami with all the distractions and everything else. I got to think that I don't know too many people that want to give 36 points, Pete, but if you were somebody who wanted to, this might be the game to do that.
Yeah, well, and they got that quarterback who transferred as well, Ward. So they've lit it up so far. They look really good, and I don't know that they're going to slip to Ball State. I think that they're smart enough to keep their eye on the ball, so to speak, and no pun intended. But I think that I think you're right. Maybe 40, maybe 50 points. That's probably the better line.
Well, thanks for joining us, folks. Pete and I will be back at 1 p.m. on Monday. We encourage all of you to check out our mastermind event. Again, it's going on in Aventura, Florida. There are limited seats remaining. You can scan that QR code on the screen there, or you can go to marketrebellion.com/mastermind. Again, Grant Cardone, my brother Pete, me, we will all be there live. Steve Kalasian will kick it off with the Rebel setup. We've got great instructors that are going to be there throughout the day. I think you're really going to enjoy Liz Clayman, Charlie Gasparino, who are also there that day at our event. So make sure you check it out, marketrebellion.com/mastermind, and we'll see you on Monday.